My name is Lena Carter, and the most humiliating moment of my life didn't happen in private. It happened in front of everyone. Music was playing, guests were laughing, cameras were flashing. My sister's wedding was perfect, until my mother decided I didn't belong there. I still remember the smell of flowers in the air and the tight smile on my face as I stood near the back of the hall, holding a small gift I had paid for with my last paycheck. I hadn't been invited officially. I came anyway, not to cause trouble, just to show up, just to be a sister. I thought that was enough. I was wrong. As the ceremony ended and people stood up clapping, my mother turned around and saw me. Her eyes didn't soften, they hardened, like she'd caught a stranger trespassing. She walked toward me slowly, deliberately. People noticed. Conversations faded. A few heads turned. "Why are you here?" she asked, loud enough for people nearby to hear. I laughed nervously. "It's Emily's wedding," I said. "I just wanted to. You weren't invited." She cut me off. The room felt smaller, hotter. Before I could say anything else, she leaned closer and said words that still echo in my head. "Don't ruin this day. Take your things and leave." For a second, I thought she was joking. I searched her face for any sign of hesitation. There was none. People were staring now. My aunt, my cousins, strangers who didn't know my name but would remember my shame. "I'm not causing any trouble," I whispered. "I'll stay in the back." My mother straightened her posture and raised her voice just enough. I said, "Leave." Silence swallowed the room. I felt my face burn as if every eye in that hall was a spotlight. My sister stood frozen near the stage, her white dress glowing under the lights. She didn't say a word. She didn't look at me. That hurt more than anything else. I walked out. No shouting, no tears, just my heels clicking against the floor as whispers followed me all the way to the door. Outside, the night air felt cold against my skin. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe. Inside that hall, they were celebrating love, family, beginnings, and I had just been erased. If you're listening to this right now, stay with me, and yeah, subscribe. Because what happened next turned this public humiliation into something none of them ever expected. I didn't always have a bad relationship with my mother. In fact, growing up, I was the easy child. The quiet one. The one who never asked for much. Emily was different. She was loud, confident, and always needed saving. And somehow, saving her became my responsibility too. I worked while she studied. I helped while she complained. I stayed silent while she shined. When our father left, I became invisible. My mother leaned on me emotionally but never stood up for me publicly. Love in our house was transactional. You earned it by being useful. And by the time Emily's wedding came around, I had stopped being useful. After that night, my phone stayed silent. No apology, no explanation, no message asking if I was okay. Photos from the wedding flooded social media instead. Smiles, poses, captions about perfect family and best day ever. I wasn't in a single picture. That's when I realized something important. Being kicked out of that wedding wasn't an accident. It was a decision. And decisions have consequences. What my mother didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been carrying a secret of my own. A truth I had kept quiet for years because I thought protecting my family mattered more than protecting myself. But that night, sitting alone in my car while fireworks went off in the distance, something inside me changed. I wasn't angry, I was clear. And once clarity arrives, there's no going back. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a reckoning. So stay with me. Because part 2 is where the mystery deepens, and the reason my mother was so desperate to keep me out finally comes to light. I didn't go home after the wedding. I couldn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the city, the sound of laughter and music from the hall still ringing in my ears like an insult I couldn't escape. My phone lay face down on the passenger seat. I didn't want to see notifications. I didn't want to see pictures. I especially didn't want to see my sister's smile frozen in white lace, pretending nothing had happened. I kept replaying the moment in my head. My mother's voice. Calm. Firm, public. I said leave. Not please, not later, not let's talk outside. Leave. Like I was a stain she needed wiped away before it ruined her perfect family image. I parked near a quiet overlook and sat there for a long time, hands trembling on the steering wheel. I told myself not to cry, not here, not now. But tears came anyway, slow and silent, the kind that come when humiliation sinks deeper than anger. I wasn't shocked that my mother chose my sister. I was shocked that she chose to do it in front of everyone. That meant something. Public humiliation is never accidental, it's a message. And the message was clear. You don't matter enough to protect. As the night grew colder, memories started surfacing, ones I had spent years pushing down. Little moments that hadn't made sense before but suddenly lined up too perfectly to ignore. The time my mother snapped at me for asking about our finances. The way she always rushed to silence me when relatives brought up the past. The strange tension whenever my name came up in serious conversations. I had always thought it was favoritism. Now it felt like fear. If you're listening to this right now and you've ever felt like your family treats you less like a person and more like a liability, stay with me. And yeah, subscribe. Because this story isn't just about betrayal, it's about the reason behind it. I went back to my apartment just before dawn, exhausted, empty. I dropped my keys on the table and collapsed onto the couch, still wearing the same dress I had worn to the wedding. The smell of flowers clung to it, mocking me. I didn't sleep. Instead, I opened my laptop. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, I just knew I needed answers. When humiliation doesn't make sense, it's usually because it's covering something else. I searched old emails first, messages between my mother and vendors, wedding planning threads I had been excluded from. Then I went deeper. Family documents stored in shared folders, files labeled vaguely. Years of digital clutter no one expected me to touch. That's when I found it. A scanned document with my name on it. My stomach tightened as I opened it. It wasn't a letter, it wasn't a will, it was a legal agreement. Old, yellowed, signed more than a decade ago, and my name was mentioned repeatedly. The words blurred at first, but one phrase snapped into focus instantly. Financial responsibility transferred. Transferred to whom? My heart pounded as I kept reading. It wasn't a loan, it wasn't inheritance paperwork, it was something else entirely. Something involving property, debt, and a signature that didn't belong to me, but benefited from my silence. I sat back slowly, the weight of the realization pressing into my chest. This wasn't about my sister's wedding. This was about control, about keeping me quiet, about making sure I never stood in the room when certain people were watching. Suddenly, my mother's behavior made terrifying sense. She wasn't protecting my sister's big day. She was protecting a secret that involved me. My phone buzzed, a message from my aunt. "You shouldn't have come, your mom was already stressed." Already stressed, not embarrassed, not ashamed, stressed, because she knew something could go wrong. I didn't reply. Instead, I saved the document to a private drive and backed it up twice. Years of being invisible had taught me one valuable lesson. When people underestimate you, they leave doors unlocked. Over the next few days, the silence from my family became louder than any argument. No calls, no check-ins, just distance. My sister posted honeymoon pictures. My mother commented hearts and blessings. I was still erased. But this time, I wasn't confused. I was observant. I started noticing patterns, old bank statements, payments made in my name, small amounts spread over years so they wouldn't raise alarms, bills I didn't recognize, accounts I had never opened. Someone had been using my identity, not recklessly, carefully, and they had built their entire sense of safety on the belief that I would never look closely enough to notice. They were wrong. By the end of that week, I knew one thing for certain. Being thrown out of that wedding wasn't just cruelty, it was panic. They thought removing me from the room would keep me from seeing something. They didn't realize that pushing me away had finally given me the distance I needed to see everything clearly. And I hadn't even uncovered the worst part yet. Because the next name I was about to find was the reason my mother had chosen my sister's happiness over my dignity. So stay with me, subscribe if you haven't. I didn't confront anyone right away, not my mother, not my sister, not even my aunt. I learned something important after the wedding night. When people are hiding something, silence is more dangerous to them than questions. So I stayed quiet, I went to work, I replied politely to messages that had nothing to do with me. I watched. And while I watched, I kept digging. The document I found wasn't just paperwork, it was a trail, a carefully hidden one. Every page I opened answered one question and created 3 more. Names I didn't recognize, addresses I had never lived at, accounts linked to my identity but not my life. The more I looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't a mistake, this wasn't carelessness, this was planned. Years ago when my father left, my mother struggled financially. I remembered that part clearly. The stress, the late nights, the whispered phone calls. What I didn't remember, what no one ever told me, was how she survived that period. She survived it through me. I found records showing that utilities, small loans, and even a short-term credit line had been taken out in my name while I was still living at home. I would have been too young to notice, too trusting to question it. The amounts were small enough to stay under the radar, spread out enough to look harmless, until you put them all together. My hands shook as I scrolled through the files, realizing something that made my stomach twist. My mother hadn't just used my identity, she had built her stability on it. That explained everything. The control, the fear. The way she always shut me down when I asked questions. The reason she couldn't risk me being seen, heard, or taken seriously at that wedding. Because if people started listening to me, they might start asking why my name appeared in places it shouldn't. If you're listening to this right now and thinking, this feels familiar, stay with me. And yeah, subscribe, because this part of the story is where the truth turns from painful to dangerous. I decided to test something. I requested my full credit report. When it arrived, I sat on the floor and read it slowly, line by line. There it was, every account, every date, every signature that wasn't mine. And one name appeared again and again as an emergency contact. My sister, Emily. That was the moment my chest tightened so hard I thought I couldn't breathe. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself there had to be another explanation. That maybe her name was added without her knowledge. That maybe she was just another pawn. But the timestamps told a different story. Some of these accounts were updated recently, very recently, after I moved out. After I stopped helping financially, after I became inconvenient. Which meant this wasn't just my mother's secret anymore. My sister knew. I replayed the wedding scene in my mind with new eyes, the way Emily wouldn't look at me. The way she stayed silent while I was humiliated. The way she let it happen. She wasn't frozen, she was complicit. That realization hurt more than my mother's betrayal ever could. Mothers disappoint you, you prepare for that possibility. But sisters are supposed to be your safe place. I remembered every time I had lent her money without asking questions. Every bill I covered just this once. Every promise she made to pay me back later. Later never came. Instead, my name stayed on the paperwork. I didn't cry when I understood that. I felt something colder, sharper. Clarity has a way of numbing emotion when it arrives all at once. That night my phone rang, I let it ring. Then a message appeared. You need to stop whatever you're doing, you're going to hurt this family. Not ask, not explain, stop. That confirmed everything. I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to a private folder and added it to the growing collection of evidence. Years of being overlooked had trained me well. I knew how to stay quiet while gathering strength. The next day, my sister messaged me. Why are you acting like this? She wrote. You embarrassed Mom enough already. Embarrassed, not wrong. Not illegal, embarrassed. That word told me exactly where I stood. I replied with one sentence. I know about the accounts. There was no response for a long time. Then, what accounts? I didn't explain, I didn't accuse. I just watched the typing bubble appear, disappear, appear again. Finally, she wrote, You're overthinking this. Mom handled everything. Handled like I was never the one paying the price. At that moment, I understood why the wedding had been the breaking point. Why my presence had suddenly become a threat. Why my mother chose public humiliation over a quiet conversation. Because I was no longer useful. And people who build their lives on your silence panic when you stop being silent. If you're still listening, this is the turning point. Subscribe if you haven't. Because from here on, this story stops being about what they did to me and becomes about what I chose to do next. I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to expose them online. I wasn't going to beg for accountability. I was going to let the truth speak in places where emotions didn't matter. Places where signatures mattered, records mattered, consequences mattered. The next morning, I booked an appointment I had been avoiding for years, not with my family, with a professional. And once I walked through that office door, there would be no pretending this was just family drama ever again. So stay with me. Because part 4 is where silence finally meets the law and the wedding night humiliation starts to make sense in the most terrifying way possible. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not my coworkers, not my friends, and definitely not my family. I walked into that office alone, carrying nothing but a folder and a calm I didn't recognize in myself. The sign on the door read Financial Advisory and Legal Review. It sounded boring, safe, neutral, which was exactly why I chose it. The woman who met me inside didn't rush me. She asked my name, offered water, and told me to take my time. That simple kindness almost broke me, not because it was big, but because it was normal. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. I laid the documents out one by one. The agreement, the accounts, the credit report, the messages. She didn't interrupt, she didn't judge. She just read carefully, her expression growing more serious with every page. After a long silence, she looked up at me and said something that changed everything. "You understand this isn't just unethical," she said. "This is fraud." The word hung in the air. Fraud, not favoritism, not family conflict. Not misunderstanding, fraud. I nodded slowly. I had suspected it. Hearing it out loud made it real. She explained it clearly, calmly. Accounts opened in my name without my informed consent. Financial responsibility transferred while I was dependent. Patterns consistent with long-term misuse of identity. And one detail that made my stomach drop even further. Some of these accounts were updated after you became financially independent, she added. Which means this didn't stop, it continued. Continued. That meant the wedding wasn't just a family event, it was a risk of witnesses. A risk of conversations. A risk of someone asking the wrong question in the wrong room, and I had been removed from that room on purpose. If you're listening right now, understand this. When people humiliate you publicly, it's often because they're terrified of what you could say privately. Stay with me. And yeah, subscribe, because this part of the story isn't about revenge, it's about consequences. The advisor asked me what I wanted to do next. That question stopped me. What did I want? An apology wouldn't fix this. A family meeting wouldn't undo years of damage. Public exposure wouldn't give me my identity back. I want it to stop, I said, and I want my name back. She nodded. Then we move carefully. Carefully, that word mattered. We didn't call anyone, we didn't confront anyone, we documented. She helped me freeze my credit. Flag disputed accounts. Create a timeline. Every step was quiet, professional, irreversible, and with each form I signed, I felt something lift off my chest. For the first time, I wasn't reacting, I was acting. That evening, my mother called again. This time I answered. "Where have you been?" she asked immediately. "Why aren't you answering messages?" I kept my voice calm. "I needed time." "You're tearing this family apart," she snapped. "Your sister is stressed, people are talking." People, always people. "I'm not tearing anything apart," I said. "I'm just not carrying it anymore." She went silent. Then her tone softened dangerously. "Whatever you think you know," she said, "we can explain. You don't need to involve outsiders." Outsiders, that was the word she used when she felt control slipping. "I already have," I replied, her breath caught. There it was. The smallest sound, but loud enough to confirm everything. "You don't understand what you're doing," she said. "This could ruin us. Us, not me, not my future, us." "I understand perfectly," I said. "I was just never supposed to." I hung up before she could respond. That night my sister messaged me repeatedly, angry at first, then panicked, then pleading, "You're overreacting." "Mom didn't mean it like that. Please don't do this." I didn't reply. Because something important had shifted. For the first time in my life, their fear was louder than mine. Over the next few days, I watched the story change. Quietly, subtly, my mother stopped posting. My sister's tone online softened. Invitations were canceled. Conversations went private. They were scrambling, not because they loved me, because systems don't care about intentions. Systems care about records. If you're still listening, this is the point of no return. Subscribe if you haven't, because once you stop protecting people who hurt you, everything changes. I didn't want them arrested. I didn't want headlines. I wanted truth documented where it mattered, and that's exactly what was happening. But there was one more twist I hadn't seen coming. A detail buried deep in the paperwork. A name I recognized, but not in the way I expected. A signature that didn't belong to my mother or my sister. Someone else had been involved. Someone with authority. Someone who had made all of this possible in the first place. And once I realized who that was, I understood why my mother had chosen my sister's wedding day to get rid of me. Because if that name ever came out, it wouldn't just destroy our family, it would destroy her reputation completely. So stay with me. Because part 5 is where the secret stops being internal and starts reaching places my family never imagined it would. I stared at that name for a long time. At first, my brain refused to accept it. I read it again, then again. I even zoomed in on the scanned document as if clarity would magically change what was written there. It didn't. The signature belonged to Daniel Moore, my uncle, my mother's older brother, the man everyone in our family called respectable, the man who worked in administration for years, the man who always spoke about ethics, rules, and doing things the right way, the same man whose presence at the wedding had felt strangely tense, the same man my mother kept glancing at that night, as if silently asking for reassurance. Everything clicked. This wasn't just my mother's secret. It wasn't just my sister's complicity. This was a family operation. Daniel's name appeared as a witness, as an intermediary. As someone who had facilitated paperwork when I was still a minor, he had the access. He had the knowledge. He knew exactly how to move things around without raising red flags. That explained how everything stayed hidden for so long. It also explained the urgency. If Daniel went down, it wouldn't just be a family scandal. It would be public, professional, permanent, and suddenly my humiliation at the wedding made perfect sense. They weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to silence me. If you're listening right now, understand this. When multiple people work together to hide the same truth, the fear isn't about guilt anymore. It's about exposure. So stay with me. Subscribe. Because this part of the story is where the web starts tearing itself apart. I brought the document back to the advisor the next morning. I didn't say a word. I just slid it across the desk and watched her face change. She exhaled slowly. "This complicates things," she said. "Or clarifies them," I replied. She nodded. "Both." She explained what that signature meant: third-party facilitation, abuse of access, intent. It meant this wasn't a series of poor decisions. It was a coordinated effort to move responsibility and risk onto me while protecting everyone else. I felt sick, not because of the legal implications, but because I realized how early they decided who I was in this family. I wasn't the daughter to protect. I was the name to use. Over the next week, things escalated quietly. I received an email from a compliance department asking for clarification, a formal letter requesting confirmation of identity, another asking for supporting documentation. I didn't panic. I responded calmly, precisely. Truthfully, each reply was another thread pulled loose. My mother called again. This time she was crying. "I don't know why you're doing this," she said. "We're family." I almost laughed. Family. The word felt hollow now. "You made me leave a wedding in front of everyone," I said calmly. "You used my name for years. You never once asked if I was okay. Don't use that word now." She begged me to reconsider, to think about my sister, about Daniel's career, about what people would say. Always people. Never me. My sister texted nonstop, long messages, voice notes, apologies that sounded more like fear than remorse. "I didn't know it was this bad," she wrote. But the document said otherwise. Dates, amounts, updates. She knew. She just didn't think I would ever look. The real turning point came when Daniel himself reached out, not angry, not defensive, calm, too calm. He asked to meet privately, said there were things I didn't understand, said this could be handled quietly within the family. That message terrified me more than anything else, because it confirmed one thing. They still thought they could manage me. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded his message to the advisor. She read it once and said, "Good, this helps." Helps. That was the moment I realized something profound. I wasn't powerless anymore. I wasn't reacting to their chaos. I was standing in the middle of a system that now had eyes on it, and systems don't get emotional. They don't forgive out of guilt. They don't care about family dinners or weddings. They care about facts. If you're still listening, this is the part where the balance shifts. Subscribe if you haven't. Because from here on, this story stops being about what they did to me and becomes about what happens when the truth reaches places you can't control. The investigation didn't explode publicly, not yet, but I could feel it moving. Slowly, deliberately, like a storm forming far out at sea. My mother stopped calling. My sister deleted posts. Daniel went silent. And for the first time since that wedding night, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like fear, because they knew something I had only just fully understood. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to expose them myself. All I had to do was step aside and let the truth walk forward on its own. But the final part of this story wasn't about them losing control. It was about what I gained once I finally stopped being the one holding everything together. So stay with me, because part 6 isn't about punishment, it's about freedom. The silence that followed was different from the silence I'd grown up with. Before, silence felt like neglect, like being forgotten in a room full of people. Now it felt intentional, heavy, careful. They weren't ignoring me anymore. They were waiting. Days passed, then weeks. No calls, no messages, no family group chats pretending everything was fine. The kind of quiet that only comes when people realize every word could be used against them. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one walking on eggshells. I kept going to work. I cooked my meals. I slept through the night without replaying arguments in my head. I checked my email once a day and followed the instructions I was given step by step. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just facts, dates, signatures, records. I learned something important during that time. When you stop begging for fairness and start standing in the truth, your power comes back quietly. One afternoon, I received a formal notice confirming what I already knew. My identity had been compromised. Certain accounts were frozen. An internal review was underway. I wasn't in trouble. I was protected. I sat at my kitchen table reading that message over and over, feeling something unfamiliar spread through my chest. Relief. Not joy, not satisfaction. Relief. The kind that comes when you finally realize you weren't imagining things all these years. If you're listening to this right now, and you've ever doubted your own memory because everyone around you told you to let it go, stay with me. And yeah, subscribe, because this part of the story isn't loud, but it's the most important one. A few weeks later, my mother reached out one last time. No accusations, no guilt, no anger, just a short message. I hope one day you'll understand why we did what we did. I stared at it for a long time, then I deleted it. Understanding isn't required for healing. Accountability is. I never responded, not because I hated her, but because responding would have meant stepping back into a role I no longer accepted, the role of emotional caretaker for people who never protected me. I heard things through the edges of life after that. Conversations that stopped when I walked into rooms, invitations that didn't come, stories rewritten without my name in them, but something else happened too. I started breathing deeper. I stopped flinching when my phone rang. I stopped apologizing for existing. I stopped shrinking myself to make others comfortable. The humiliation at the wedding no longer felt like the worst moment of my life. It felt like the moment the mask slipped. Because if my mother hadn't kicked me out in front of everyone, I might have stayed silent forever. I might have kept protecting secrets that were never mine to carry. I might have kept paying for a life built on my invisibility. That public rejection didn't destroy me, it freed me. I don't call what happened revenge. Revenge requires anger. This required clarity. I didn't win by watching them fall. I won by walking away intact. Sometimes people ask if I miss my family, and the answer is complicated. I miss the idea of what family is supposed to be. I miss who I thought they were. But I don't miss the fear. I don't miss the silence. I don't miss being useful only when I was quiet. The truth cost me relationships, but it gave me myself, and that's a fair trade. If you're standing in a moment right now where you've been publicly shamed, quietly used, or emotionally erased, hear this clearly. Being rejected doesn't mean you were wrong. Sometimes it means you were dangerous to a lie. My mother thought kicking me out of that wedding would end the problem. She didn't realize it was the beginning of the end of control, and the beginning of my life on my own terms. So if you stayed till the end of this story, stay a little longer. Subscribe, not for drama, not for revenge stories, but for truth. Because the quietest strength is the kind that doesn't need an audience. And the most powerful ending isn't watching someone else lose everything. It's realizing you never lost yourself.